life of King David and the example that he has given to us. May we all find ways to apply his life to us and his example. Thank you for all those that are here, for the classes downstairs, for the teachers, for the students in attendance, and for this church. Be with us in our worship today. May we worship in spirit and in truth. In Jesus' name we pray. Good morning. How's everybody today? We would turn to 2 Samuel, chapter 5 and 6. So prior to this chapter, the kingdom was kind of divided. How long was the kingdom divided? Anybody remember? This is not the divided kingdom. This is under David, but during his reign, it was still divided.
About 3.5 years.
About 3.5 years. Who was king over Israel, the northern part? After King Saul, his son, Ishbosheth. Yes. And David was king of Judah. Did Ishbosheth have complete control of the north? No. Why? The Philistines. The Philistines had conquered Saul. And remember what it said? That the Israelites fled from their villages? And then the Philistines took over their villages. So there's the Philistines right now were scattered throughout the north. And Ishbosheth didn't even stay on this side of Canaan or the Jordan. He went to the east side of the Jordan. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that there were so many Philistines around him. It probably wasn't safe. So, well, he was eventually murdered, wasn't he? By his own people. That tells you a little something about him. When you're murdered by your own commanders. We're to see that as we study the Kings. That kind of stuff happens in the north all the time. That's why there's no continued lineage, because you get killed by a commander and someone else takes over, then their lineage starts. But Saul's lineage was never to be Ishbosheth was killed. So now David has a chance to combine or unite the kingdom. In Deuteronomy 17, it says, "Be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your fellow Israelites. Do not place a foreigner over you." This is in Deuteronomy. So there's several stipulations here where God says, I'm going to put a king over you. One, it's someone God has to appoint. Right? Just like he appointed Saul. After Saul, he appointed David. But also, it has to be someone from their family or their nationality, of an Israelite. Can't be from a foreign nation. So that's in Deuteronomy. Well, in chapter 3 of 2 Samuel, we talked about Abner. Who was Abner?
General over Ishbosheth.
Please raise your hand. Thank you. But yeah, he was the general for Saul and then Ishbosheth. And believe it or not, he actually betrayed Ishbosheth and wanted David to be king over the entire country, over all of Israel. So Abner was doing the right thing. Unfortunately, he was not able to succeed in his endeavor to unite the kingdom under David. Why? He met an early what? Death. He met an early demise. By who? Who killed him? Cindy.
Joab?
Joab did. Joab killed him. Joab didn't trust him. Joab didn't believe him because he killed Joab's brother. You can't blame Joab, right? But I don't know. I'm kind of on the Abner's side. He didn't want to kill his brother. He didn't want to kill him. He even told him, "I don't want to kill you." But he had to. But that's what happened to Abner. Now in chapter 5, all of Israel came to Hebron to appoint David as king. So here in chapter 5 that we're going to study, it says they recognize three things. One, he was family. Two, he was a great military leader. So even when they were under Saul, who was fighting their battles? David. Who was winning their battles?
David.
And you all know how that is. When you've got a great military leader, you end up a lot of the people end up following him because he's got the whole backing of the military. They gain a lot of power. When you're the commander of the military, you gain a lot of power, a lot of political power. So David, despite even he eventually was running from Saul, they still considered him a great military leader, and they recognized that God was with him. So that's one thing we see now in chapter 5. They recognize, one, he is family. He's from the tribe of Judah. He's an Israelite. Number two, he's a great military leader. He was winning our battles, not Saul. And also they recognize that the Lord has appointed him. They said, the Lord said, you will be like a shepherd for my people. You will become their leader. So they recognize those three things now. So it sounds like all of Israel is ready to get behind David. No longer will the country be split between north and the south. If you look here, we can see a little bit of David's timeline. David was anointed or commissioned as king probably between the age of 10 and 15. He was pretty young. We don't know exact age, but he was a young lad. When he started reigning as king in just the south, how old was he?
About 30?
About 30 years old. So then he reigned in Judah by himself for how long? It says 7 years. So he reigned total of 40. So under the united Israel, he will reign about 33 years under the united Israel. So that's kind of the chronology here of King David. So the leaders of Israel came to King David at Hebron. David made an agreement with them in front of the Lord. They anointed him as king over Israel. So beginning in chapter 5, we see that they anoint him as king. Now remember, this is the third time David's been anointed. Remember the first time? Who anointed him? Samuel. The second time he was anointed to become king of just Judah. Now he's being anointed a third time to be king over all of Israel. The third time David's been anointed. Third time's a charm. I heard that. So David wanted to make Jerusalem his new capital. Currently, he lived in Ziklag, and then he moved to where? What city? Hebron. Yes. So he's been in Hebron. What was the capital of the north where Saul was? Remember that? Karen?
Was it Damascus?
Damascus, I don't think so.
That's
Where did Saul live?
he lived in
Gibeah. Yeah. I mean, wherever he lived would be considered the capital. So, but Saul lived in Gibeah. Gibeon is right there. I don't know if there's a big difference between the two, Gibeah or Gibeon. Joshua 15:63 says, but the tribe of Judah could not drive out the Jebusites. So David wanted to make Jerusalem his new capital. It's been in what Jerusalem is in what territory of what tribe? Karen? Judah? No.
No, it's
Technically, it's on the border, but in Benjamin, yeah. But technically, because the Israelites have not been able to conquer it, no one really claims it, right? So it's maybe neutral. What's nice about Jerusalem, it's in the middle of the country. So people will be able to come from the north to Jerusalem, also from the south to Jerusalem. But Joshua 15:63 describes that the Judah could not drive out the Jebusites who lived in the city of Jerusalem. So the Jebusites lived there among the people to this day. Joshua or Judges 1 says the tribe of Benjamin failed to drive out the Jebusites. Why have up until now they failed to drive out the Jebusites from Jerusalem? One time it says they conquered them. But again, they failed to drive them out. In other words, they moved right back in. Jesse?
I think it might have had to do with the location, the way they were set up, and they were fortified, and I think that they had chariots as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It sat on a hill, the hill of Zion. It was easily defended. So it was difficult, one of the more difficult cities to conquer. But I also think it was God's plan. God, told them from the beginning after they failed to drive out the inhabitants, he said, now I'm going to make them a thorn in your side. And it's going to be difficult for you to drive them out. But I think this city was all part of God's plan. And he was waiting for David for this very time. Calvin?
Yeah, there's a question of if they were there when Melchizedek was there.
Yeah.
Because Israel wasn't there, someone had to be there when Melchizedek was there.
Yeah. I mean, it's been under Canaan rule for a long time. So you can see how it looks like it sits up on the hills. It'd be hard to conquer that. People would be able to throw spears, rocks, arrows down at you. It'd be hard to take. David and his men marched on Jerusalem and they attacked it. The Jebusites told David he will never be able to get in. They even said that our lame and our blind will be able to stop you. So David probably didn't have, they didn't think, enough men to conquer it. But they said, even our lame and our blind will stop you, David. They were pretty confident, considering the reputation of David. I don't know if David's ever lost a battle. So what did David do? Maybe there wasn't a way to conquer it. Legit way to conquer it. A traditional way to conquer it. But David had an ace up his sleeve, didn't he? He's probably known it for a while. Cindy?
He went to the waterway. Yeah.
That's right.
Where to get the water?
You know how to get in. See this down here? Probably a waterway. David knew of a secret way to get in the city, the water tunnel. This was used in order to get water to the city in case of a siege. Remember Hezekiah's tunnel? Hezekiah built that. But this is before that. So this was their tunnel they had to go from Gihon Spring outside of the city into the city. Now Hezekiah built a tunnel where it went from Gihon Spring but to the pool of Siloam. It kind of stayed within the city limits. But you can still see Hezekiah's tunnel today and the tunnel they're talking about here. David said, whoever attacks first will be the commander of my armies. So he knows a way in. He says, the first one to do it, I'm going to put you as commander of all my armies. So of course, Joab was the first to attack. David called it the city of David, or the city of Zion, because it was on Mount Zion. How fitting, they still call it the city of David today. They still call it the city of Zion today. How fitting. What other significant event took place on this side of history? On this site? Cindy?
Yeah, David brought the ark back to there, didn't he?
Well, in a minute.
It's where Abraham
Yes.
told the sacrifice.
This is where many moons ago Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac. So it's a holy site, just like we were talking about Hebrew. God said, "When you become king of Judah, I want you to move to Hebron." Well, Hebron was kind of a holy site because that's where Abraham first lived. So I think there's a reason God chooses these places, because they have some meaning to Him as well. And I think it's no coincidence that He chose this site.
It's also hinted that Melchizedek came from Jerusalem.
Yeah.
His name was Salam.
Yeah, that's what Calvin was saying. Melchizedek came from here.
Yeah.
According to verse 8, did David kill all the inhabitants of the city at this time? Look at verse 8 of chapter 5. It says right at the end of verse 8 of chapter 5, therefore they say, this is a saying, the lame or the blind shall not come into this house. They're talking about the house that David built there. So David calls now just the regular Jebusites, he calls them all lame and blind. They said, you can't even come defeat us, because even our lame and our blind will be able to defeat you. Now he says, well, your lame and your blind will never even be able to enter my house. But it sounds like he left some Jebusites there. And so they're living amongst them. They will never be allowed in his house. So it kind of sounds like they're still living among them after they conquered them. But you never hear from the Jebusites ever again after this. This was kind of the end of them. Even though they went all this long without being able to be conquered, this is the end of the Jebusites. So here's Gihon Spring outside the city. It had a vertical shaft going up, so it wouldn't have been easy to get in. And this is probably why it's never been tried before. But they didn't know Joab very well. They didn't know David's men very well. If you read in the Chronicles, David is surrounded by heroes. David is surrounded by men who have conquered sometimes 800 people at a time by themselves. So these men are heroes. These are mighty men. These are not men to be trifled with. And David is surrounded by them. And this is Hezekiah's tunnel today. You can still go walk through that. This is the tunnel that Hezekiah built. Started at one end, started at the other end, and they met in the middle. That's just an engineering feat. It's hard to do today, but they did it back then. Here's David's palace below the city. David went to live in the stronghold of the city, and he continued to build the city around the stronghold. And it says David continued to become more powerful each and every day because God was with him. And King Hiram of Tyre, you know where Tyre is? That's another city on the coast, the Phoenician coast, that the Israelites never chased out. So the Phoenicians continue to live there to this day. Tyre and Sidon are two of their main cities, their port cities right on the Mediterranean. But King Hiram knew of David, found out that David became king of all of Israel, and the first thing he wanted to do was pay tribute. That's a smart thing to do. You don't want to get the new king mad at you, because what could he do? He could come and conquer you. He could come and wipe you out. So King Hiram, first thing he does is sends David wood and wood workers and masonries and stone workers. I'm going to build you a house, David. I'm going to build you a house fitting for a king. And that's what King Hiram does. Well, we see later, when Solomon becomes king, they help him out also to build what? The temple. David won't be allowed to build the temple. Solomon will. And so this, again, we'll see this Tyre supplying a lot of the wood, the cedar wood, to build the temple. But here, he helps David build a palace suitable for a king. David continued to have more wives, it says. And we know back in Deuteronomy, what was the instructions that God gave the kings? No wives. You know, don't amass wives. What else did he say not to amass? Cindy?
Horses and chariots?
Horses and chariots. Remember, the Israelites have always been scared of chariots. Way back in Israel. Even when they tried to conquer Hazor. But how are we going to do this? Because they have chariots. Oh no. But God's always told them not to amass those things, but for only really one reason, because he wants them to rely on him.
Right.
So when you win these battles, which God has proven over and over again, you can beat anybody at any time without those things. But we see David still falls under that trap of wanting to be like the other nations, wanting to solidify his power by intermarrying with other nations. So he still falls into that trap, even though David is a man after God's own heart. But he continues to amass many wives. So we first see Jebus mentioned in Judges 19. If you go way back in Judges, we see the city of Jebus or Jerusalem mentioned. Remember the story of the man who had a concubine, and they were traveling north, and they said, well, let's stop in Jebus, let's stop in Jerusalem. And they said, no, because it won't be safe. That's not an Israelite city. Let's stop in Gibeah, the Benjamite city. We'll be safe there. And they ended up making a huge mistake with that. Because that's when the concubine got killed by the men of that city, where she was raped all night. And he divided up her body and sent it throughout all of Israel. And the Benjamite tribe ended up almost practically being wiped out because of that. Only 600 men left. But that was Jebus, that was Jerusalem that he didn't go to. Maybe he should have. The Philistines heard that Israelites had anointed David as king over Israel. So the whole Philistine army went to find him. So David becomes united king. Other countries, other nations are finding out about this. Well, King Hiram of Tyre decided, I'm going to pay tribute to David. Well, the Philistines didn't do that. The Philistines have been a thorn in their side since the time of who? Samson. We start seeing the Philistines being a thorn in the Israelite side from the time of Samson. Now they've been a thorn in their side all throughout. David and Saul. And the first thing the Philistines want to do when they hear David is combined, united the country. Now they didn't bother David when he was just in the south. When he was just for 7 years commander or the king of Judah. They didn't bother him. But now that he's the leader of the entire Israelite nation, they said, we need to wipe this guy out. So they devised a plan to unite and go attack David. This is what they're going to do. So here's Jerusalem. This is called the Valley of Rephaim. All the Philistines occupy most of this territory. They even occupy some villages up in here. But they're all going to unite, and they're going to camp. They're going to meet in this Valley of Rephaim here, right next to Jerusalem. So what does David do? What does David always do?
Inquire of the Lord.
He inquires of the Lord. David asked the Lord, shall I attack the Philistines? And will you hand them over to me? That's just a great example we see from David over and over again. Even if it's just, where do I live? Now it's, shall I attack them? He's always inquiring of the Lord. That's just such a good example for us. We should do that more often, even in the small things in our lives. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's the small things in our life. We call those arrow prayers. Just shoot an arrow prayer. It doesn't have to be a long. David went and defeated the Philistine army. David said, the Lord has burst through my enemies like a flood water. And they named the place Baal Perazim, which means God has burst through. So God told him, yeah, go conquer him. And he did it. It doesn't say how. Just that he wouldn't defeat them. Well, I sure would like to know the how, though. Because when you read about the people David had with him, the mighty men, just, it really blows your mind. I don't know if they were superhuman, if they were given powers by God, or what the deal was, but these, just read the Chronicles. The stories of these men are crazy. It said David wanted to drink one time from the waters of Bethlehem, but they had to go through the Philistine army. Two of the men said, we'll get you water. So they burst through, and they went and got water, burst through, and came back. Oh, here's your water. I can't believe it. So David took the water and he poured it out on the ground. Because this is God's holy water. I'm not going to drink this water. Because you guys just risked your life for it. I'm going to give it to God. This is the people he had with him. They were crazy, but they were heroes. Well, the Philistines left behind their idols because they got so utterly destroyed, and they ran off so quickly, they left all their idols behind. Now, they believed that their gods reside in their idols. So that was a big deal for them to leave all those idols laying around. So David instructed his men, go pick up all those idols, gather them up, and I want you to burn them. Because not only David is saying that I can defeat you, now I can defeat your gods too. So David is just wanting to literally demoralize them. Is that the end of the Philistines? They're not done. Again, the Philistines' army came back, and they camped again at the valley of Rephaim. But see, the Philistines already, now they know David's tactics. Now they know how to defend David. But David's just going to do the same thing again. So what does David do? He inquires of the Lord, like David. What did God say? What does God say? The last time God said, yeah, go destroy him. But that's not what God says this time. God actually gives them some specific instruction, which God has done before. God has told them many times, like when they defeated Ai, I want you to go in from the side, I want you to go from the back, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. Sometimes God gives them the military strategy. So it's not just happenstance, I'm going to make you so powerful they can't defeat you. He goes, I'm going to give you a little strategy here. So he does here. I want you to go behind them, attack them from in front of the poplar trees. You will hear the sound like marching feet from the tops of the trees. Whenever God's involved, it seems like there's always something supernatural going on that gets them confused, that stirs them up, or they don't know who they're even fighting sometimes. They fight themselves.
When you were talking about the mighty men that surrounded David, it's just like, even today, it's like, I think of the term, let go and let God. And David was a man after God's own heart, so God made sure he brought the people to David that David needed, that were going to be necessary for everything that and especially since David is constantly going to God and asking. So, of course, that's how God backs us up. He gives us the people we need whenever we're seeking truthfully and honorably what his will is. That's just kind of the way that I think about it.
Good point. So we see here, God says, go march in front of these trees. You're going to hear something like marching feet to the tops of the trees. Then you must go quickly and attack at that point. So the sound of the trees made it sound like marching feet. I personally think God was doing that. And I think he made actually sound like an army. So it was also the point to advance, but also cause confusion amongst the Philistines. You think so? Yeah. But whenever God gets involved, something like that always happens. And he causes confusion among the Philistines and the other army. God said, I will be marching ahead of you. I will defeat the Philistine army. So even now, God is showing David, I'm doing this for you. You're not doing it. So God wants to make sure that David keeps a humble heart in all this. I will defeat the Philistine army. So David obeyed the Lord, and David killed the Philistines all along the way from Gibeon to Gezer. So some cities of note here on our map. Here's the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, Sea of Galilee up here. Here's Jerusalem. We see Gibeon up here, or Gibeah. This is where Saul lived. I also want you to keep in mind Kiryat Jearim. What's important about this city? This is where what is? The ark. Yes. Beth Shemesh. What was significant about Beth Shemesh? Jesse?
Where Saul and his sons were nailed to the wall.
Yeah. But also, they tried to house the Ark of the Covenant. Here's Bethlehem. Keep in mind a couple cities. Here's Gilgal. Gilgal is where they worship the Lord with the tabernacle. Here's Shiloh, also where they worship God with the tabernacle. And now they're going to be worshiping God here in Jerusalem. Once he gets the ark there, we're going to talk about that. Here's Hebron, where David's old capital was. Ziklag, where he lived amongst the Philistines. He went from there to Hebron, now up to Jerusalem. The Ark of the Covenant when it got captured by the Philistines, was down here. It was kind of making its tour through here because while the Philistines had captured and destroyed Shiloh up here, somewhere up here, north, yeah. When they had conquered Shiloh, the tabernacle was moved, but they also stole the Ark of the Covenant and moved it down this way. For 7 months, it wandered through Philistine territory, causing havoc wherever it went, causing death and disease.
Yeah.
And they finally got rid of it. And they sent it with a cart. Put it on a cart and they sent it away. And it went to Beth Shemesh. And what did the men of Beth Shemesh do? They opened it. They shouldn't have opened it. And many men died. What did they do with it? They sent it away too. They sent it away, they were afraid of it. So they sent it to Kiriath Jearim. Get it out of here. We don't like it. Causes death. Well, no, you looked inside it. It was holy. It's the holiest thing they had. After the Philistines destroyed Shiloh, they took the ark for 7 months. Cursed. They sent it back to Israel. They went to Beth Shemesh where 70 men died. They sent a message to Kiriath Jearim. The ark has returned. This is what Beth Shemesh said. The ark has returned. Come and get it. You will love it. They didn't want it. It's because they disobeyed God. Remained in Kiriath Jearim for 20 years. Meanwhile, Saul's up here just having a heyday, ruling for 40 years without the ark. So David gathered 30,000 men to go with him to Kiriath Jearim. He also asked the priests and the Levites to come with him. Let's all go get it, and let's bring it to Jerusalem, my new capital. So they built a new cart. They took the ark from Abinadab's house, put it on a new cart, and Abinadab had 2 sons, Uzzah and Ahio, who were leading the new cart. Now think about it, these boys, I don't know how old they were, but they were grown up with this ark in their home. How familiar do you think they would have gotten with the ark? Or comfortable seeing it and just having it in their home? Pretty comfortable. So, they take a position of authority. Did they have any authority? No. They take a position of authority. They're leading the ark. They're like, come on guys, this is our ark. We've had this for 20 years. Even though the Levites and the priests are there. Well, they should know better. David and all the people were very excited. They were singing, they were playing instruments. They were shouting, making joy to the Lord. When they arrived at the threshing floor, I think the point of that is that the threshing floor might not have been very even, where they knocked the wheat. But the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah, one of the boys, reached up and steadied the ark. And it says the Lord's anger was aroused and struck him dead. What he did? He's housed the ark for 20 years. All he wanted to do was keep it from getting damaged. But it's the most holy thing they have. That's what they forgot. It represents God's presence. We've studied the ark. We've studied the old law. We've studied how important it was and how holy the ark was. The care, the pains they had to go through to house it, to cover it, to carry it, to worship it. And these kids, it's just been stuck in a closet for 20 years. No big deal if we just touch it. Well, God showed them.
It also goes to show that His law is way more important than our intent, regardless of how good our intent might be.
The road paved with good intentions, right? It's not the road that leads to heaven.
Hey, Gail. I think David had a part of this too, because the Levites
Of course.
are the only one who's supposed to carry that. And they said he and his men went to get the ark, so
Yep.
he had a responsibility. Yes.
That's right. But he had priests and he had Levites with him. He asked them to come.
They didn't do their job like
No one did their job. He let these boys take charge. That's the whole point. He put the boys in charge. Well, we'll let them be in charge because they've had it for 20 years. It doesn't work that way. David became angry because the Lord did what he did. And what a happy day turned into a sad day. A rejoicing into solemn depression. So, David was afraid of the ark, just like the men of the Philistines when they became afraid of the ark. Just like the men of Beth Shemesh when they became afraid of the ark. Now David was afraid of the ark. So he didn't bring it to Jerusalem. He didn't know what to do with it. So he sticks it here, in this guy's house. It's been in someone's house for 20 years. Abinadab. Now it's going to Obed-Edom's house. And who knows how long it's going to sit there. David doesn't know. He just knows, I don't want anything to do with it. It just causes death wherever it goes. But that's not the problem. The problem is not the ark. The problem is the people.
Yeah.
Yes. The ark was at the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months. And during that time, it says the Lord blessed the house.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the ark.
Right.
And David started to figure this out. The people told David, and it was because the people told David that God is blessing Obed-Edom, and it's because the ark is there.
Right.
So David says, great, let's go get it. So here we go again. Did David learn his lesson? So David fetched the ark from Obed's house. The men carrying poles, says they walked 6 steps. They stopped, and they sacrificed a bull and a fat cow. I think David's learned his lesson. Notice they're carrying it with poles, for one. And two, we're not leaving until we sacrifice to God. They do that the first time. That's a big deal. So this time David said, no one except the Levites may carry the ark.
Right.
David called Levites from Kohath, Merari, and Gershon,
Right.
who are all the 3 sons of Levi. And they're the ones that are supposed to take care of the ark.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are supposed to carry the tabernacle.
Yeah.
Because David says, because you Levites did not carry the ark the first time,
Right.
notice who he's blaming.
Yeah.
Because you Levites did not carry. Well, he did ask them to come, and they didn't instruct him. Because you did not carry the ark the first time the right way, the anger of the Lord our God has burst out against us.
Yeah.
We failed to ask God how to move it properly.
Right.
So he remembers that, yeah, I didn't actually ask God how to do that.
The Levi, if they're supposed to be the priests, they should be aware of how that is supposed to be done.
Right.
And that's where it's like,
That's why he's blaming them.
Which, yeah, David is in the right to blame him, but he's also wrong in his own intention too.
Yeah.
Of course.
It says he summoned Zadok and Abiathar, the high priests. So here they are. The ark was being carried by the Levite clan of Kohath.
All right.
Remember the Kohath, Merari, and Gershon. Kohath is the clan that's supposed to carry the ark. Well, here, notice the priests were to cover the items. The priest's job was to make sure this gets covered so no one sees it. This is probably not accurate. It probably would have been covered.
Yeah.
Okay? So the priest's job, the actual priest, not all priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. Remember that. So the priests of Kohath were to cover the ark. But when this was done, the non-priests of the Kohath were to pick it up and carry it. Okay? So now they know how to do it properly.
Yes.
So David fetched the ark from Obed's house. The man carrying the poles walked 6 steps. David was wearing a linen ephod, which was more like this, just a cloak. He danced with all of his energy in front of the Lord.
All right.
Do we worship and serve God with all our energy?
It
It says he was using all his energy.
Yeah. Praise God.
And someone didn't like it.
Right.
Who didn't like it? Notice in Romans it says, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice for true and proper worship. That's what he expects of us today. And that's our whole being, isn't it? If we offer our body as a living sacrifice, so along the lines of David, we need to offer true and proper worship with our whole being,
Right.
like David did. Doesn't mean we have to jump up and down and dance like he did, but we need to give it our all. Ask the ark of the Lord, as the ark entered the city, notice who's watching. his wife, Mikhail, who he had just retrieved. He made a deal for her with Abner. He says, I'll let you make me king. It never happened, but you have to bring Mikhail back. I want my wife back. They loved each other. It was his first love. Well, that was short-lived. Love didn't last that long. She was raised by Saul, remember that. He wasn't raised by David.
She was married.
She was married to another guy
Another guy for 10 years.
for 10 years. So she was raised by Saul as a princess in a castle, and that's how she liked to live. So she saw David dancing around like a fool in her mind. And it disgusted her.
Yeah.
She had contempt for him. He wasn't acting kingly.
Right.
He had taken off his royal robes. And that disgusted her
Yeah.
because it embarrassed her. But David offered sacrifices. He built a tent specifically for the ark. It wasn't the tabernacle, but he built a specific tent for that. David appointed certain Levites. Now, David's doing his job now. He's appointing Levites to be in charge of the ark, to be in charge of worship here, to guard the ark, to guard the tent. He's appointing Levites to be in charge of singing and worshiping. So now David is starting to incorporate the things that he should be doing in worship. On this day, David gave Asaph and his fellow Levites the song of thanksgiving. You can read here in chapter 6 the whole song that David writes for them, and he wants them to use it in their worship. So David is involved not only here in singing and dancing, but he also creates a song for them that they will continue to use in their worship. Here's the tabernacle. This is not where David put the ark. This is where it should be, but this is not where David put the ark. The ark says David in 1 Chronicles, David stationed Zadok, the other high priest, at the tabernacle, which is in Gibeon. That's where Saul used to live, in that area. So the tabernacle is not in Jerusalem. Keep that straight. The tabernacle had previously been in Gilgal. That's where it was first. Then it went to Shiloh. Then remember we talked about it being in Nob, where Saul killed all the priests because they helped David with the bread on the showbread table. Well, that was in Nob. So we know it was in Nob, and now it's in Gibeon according to 1 Chronicles. So the ark will not be there. The ark will be in Jerusalem. But the tabernacle, which they should still go and worship, will be there in Gibeon. And David went home to see Mikhail. And what did she say? You uncovered yourself in the eyes of the maidens. And as of one base fellow shamelessly uncovers himself. You just acted like a normal person. How shameless. You took off your royal robes. That's embarrassing. And what did David say? He went home to bless his family, to be excited. Mikhail wasn't excited. She didn't care about the ark, just like Saul didn't care about the ark. Saul had the tabernacle up there in Gibeon, but he didn't go get the ark. He left it in Kiriath Jearim. He didn't care about it, and neither does Mikhail. All she was worried about how it looks, how David looks. She wants him to look kingly because that's how she was raised. She has her priorities wrong. Sometimes we get our priorities mixed up. We put our priorities on impressing people and how we look and how we come across instead of just worshiping God and humbling ourselves. And that's what David said. David said, I humbled myself. I took off my royal robes and I acted like I was the leader. I wanted to just worship God. I didn't care if I looked foolish. I was shouting joy to the Lord. I was praising God. And she reamed him for it. And so what happens to Mikhail after this?
She basically cursed. Didn't say she was cursed, but she was bearing children.
Yeah, it says that she was barren the rest of her life. Whether that means, like you said, whether that means she was barren or David just never went in.
He's
Like, I
right.
don't consider you my wife anymore because of certain attitudes. He wants to be in his life as the king of the nation, as being the spiritual leader,
Right,
not the king that she wants him to be, the king that Saul was.
right,
That didn't work out so well.
sure did.
David's not going to start that. Make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. In fact, David was humbling himself by taking out his royal robe.
That's right.
He knew that the slaves, and she said they don't respect him. He said, I know the slaves will respect me as king because I'm humbling myself.
All right.
Good class. Thank you, everyone.